Hello, welcome to the financial presentation and the proposed operating referendum for the Austin Public Schools. This is Lori Volz, Executive Director of Finance and Operations. This is the unassigned fund balance regarding each district in the Big Nine. The unassigned fund balance category is very important in the overall financial analysis of school districts. It is where our main operations are charged, such as salaries, benefits, supplies, materials, operating expenses such as utilities, and repair items. You will see on the far left that Austin is identified. It shows 3 fiscal years worth of audited financials. And to keep in mind, our district fund balance policy is 8.33%. And we are seeing a decline in our fund balance, which means that we've been running at a loss. But you'll also see that most districts in the Big Nine are also having some level of decline, especially in the last fiscal year ending 2019. So it kind of tells a story that there are financial challenges that public schools are facing and a lack of adequacy of funding of the Gen Ed formula. This chart is in regards to the operating referendum that is in place for each district in the Big Nine. You'll see Austin is on the far left at a very small amount of $42 per pupil. And on the far right, the highest amount is Northfield at $1,748 per pupil. The overall average for the Big Nine is over $800 per pupil. And so what we are seeing here in our district is that we've been able to get by all these years with a very small operating referendum, but we are now at the crossroads where we do need to ask the public for an operating referendum. And a main driver of this, the reason we've been able to get by this long, is that we've had growth in our student enrollment, and we are funded on the number of students that we serve. And so with the fact that our enrollment has flattened out, we're no longer growing, that has then brought the need for an operating referendum because of the lack of adequacy in the Gen Ed formula, as I mentioned before. This graph is showing the cost of Gen Ed fund expenditures per ADM. Average daily membership is what ADM stands for, and that is a student count that we are funded on. And so just to explain, this chart is just showing the cost of education in the general fund, and then it includes all types of expenses in the general fund, not only the unassigned general fund, but also the reserves for operating capital, reserves for long-term facility maintenance. All those various categories of the general fund are reflected in this cost figure here. And you'll see Austin on the far left, and how we measure up and compare to, we're very similar, for example, to Northfield, and kind of at a middle of the road type of expenses, so we're certainly not at the high end. Keep in mind, it's kind of interesting that Northfield has such a very high operating referendum, and yet their costs per ADM are somewhat a similar level as we are. This chart is showing the general fund property taxes per ADM, or per average daily membership student count. And so this chart is actually showing the type of tax impact the general fund operations are, and you'll see that Austin on the far left is substantially lower than others in the Big Nine. And the main driver of the fact that we are this low for general fund property taxes is the fact that we have a very, very small operating referendum. This particular graph includes all funds included in the property taxes. So it includes general fund, community ed fund, for example, debt service fund. And so taking all those categories together, it also is ranking Austin on the far left to other districts. And you can see we are still substantially lower than most districts. And So even the fact that we do have some building bonds in debt service that we are certainly paying off each year, but also at a lower level than most, and also again comes into play the fact that we have a very low operating referendum. So basically it's showing that no matter which way you slice it, our property taxes per average daily membership is much lower than our other counterpart Big 9 districts. This chart is showing our enrollment history. As I mentioned before, we've been growing, and that's been greatly helpful to our financials when we were growing. Shows in 2010-11 on the far left, and we had very nice growth up through the 17-18 year. And then we found that in 18-19 we had plateaued, just a very slight decrease in enrollment. And so at this point, even in the current year 19-20 that we're in, very similar enrollment than in the prior year. At some point we do project that we'll grow again, but at the moment that is not happening. And so this just shows how that enrollment growth has occurred, and it definitely has helped us in the past with our financials. This chart is showing our actual enrollment fall of 2019, and you can see by the grade level where our enrollment bubbles are. Grade 6 is quite a bit higher than some of the other grade levels at 450. And as we see that grade progression, that enrollment bubble will eventually get to the high school. But it is interesting that you can also see that kindergarten was very strong this past school year at 404, and that's really, really good to see, as we want to see that strong enrollment continue. So that is also helping us currently with that enrollment piece. This is our free and reduced percentage of enrollment comparison, and it shows 4 years worth of data. Austin's on the far left. We have a high free and reduced account, free and reduced lunch eligibility in our student population. This last year, 2020, is showing at 55%. And you'll see other districts in the Big 9 that also have a high level of economically disadvantaged student population. Faribault is actually a little higher than us at 62%. You'll see Albert Lea being similar to us at 52%. So it is an important dynamic to be aware of in our student population, and it does bring additional needs for supports of those students. This chart is showing our English learner, or EL, population as a percentage of enrollment, and for Austin on the far left, it is showing for 2020, for example, at a 20% level. Faribault is also high as we are at 24%, and it does show all the Big 9. Another piece that I want to comment here is that yes, it brings some additional programming that we would provide to these students, but we also do have a funding stream to some extent that comes to help out with that need. This is the basic skills revenue that is tied to our EL funding as well as what's called compensatory. So both of these categories under basic skills are addressing two things. One is the high free and reduced count drives our basic skills revenue, as well as our EL count is part of that basic skills revenue. So I just want to point out that with those demographic pieces for our student enrollment, we do have some very important funding streams that help support and provide additional funds for the education of our students. And Austin is on the far left. We receive a substantial amount of money in this basic skills category of $5.5 million. And you may recall that Faribault has a similar demographic as we do regarding free and reduced count and EL, and they're a very similar level of basic skills revenue as we. So it is kind of an interesting comparison there. So in response to our financial challenges, the district has put in place a variety of cost-saving measures through cost reductions and also new revenues to help improve the bottom line of our financial position. In this fiscal year ending the 1920 year, we have a variety of cost-saving measures that were put in place, totaling $395,000. We also have some additional cost-saving measures put in place for the upcoming school year of the 2021 year, and that tallies to $478,000. There's additional revenues that will be coming into play in both fiscal years 2021 and 21-22 that total $395,000. So in grand total, we have put in place these saving measures of $1.2 million, which help address the financial position of our district here at the Austin Public Schools. However, even with these cost-saving measures put in place, we still do need an operating referendum. So in summary, again, this is our current operating referendum authority. Austin, again, is very low at only $42 per pupil. And you'll see the Big 9 is substantially higher than us. The district closest to us is Mankato. And you can see they're over $400 higher per pupil than we are. So the proposal that has been brought to the school board and now approved is to go to the voters asking for an increase in the operating referendum of $505 per pupil for a 10-year period. The operating referendum will go to a vote to the public at this fall's November general election. And upon passage of a new operating referendum, what this would mean for the school district would be an increase of revenue of $2.8 million per year. Half of this new funding stream would come in the form of state aid. As you see, 49% would come in the form of state aid. The remaining 51% would be local levy. Just to give an illustration, the tax impact of a $125,000 home, which is kind of the average home value in the Austin Public School District, would see an increase of $9.95 per month in their property taxes. Thank you for listening to the presentation on our district financials and operating referendum. Lori Volz, Executive Director of Finance and Operations. Have a good day.